Hello, indie spirits, indie writers, indie authors, and consumers of indie media. I am Brooke Warner, here with my indie-minded and indie-spirited co-host Grant Faulkner. Hello, Grant. We are celebrating independent publishing and media with this really special interview featuring Roxane Gay and Debbie Millman, who together and fairly recently bought the Rumpus, an influential independent online literary magazine founded in 2009. And this is an unusual interview for us because it's not about memoir per se, but everything about Roxane and Debbie being the ones to carry on the legacy of the Rumpus certainly fits into our sensibility and ethos around indie publishing. And I know that we were both very pleased to see this news when it was announced last spring.
Yeah, and super pleased that they reached out to us to actually talk to them about it. Very honored by that. And yeah, when that bit of publishing news flashed onto my feeds, I was just so super happy to see it, and that's because we are so at risk of just losing indie media altogether. We're having problems with the word indie.
I know,
today,
indie
Brooke.
media.
Indie media, say it 3 times.
Mouths.
Yeah. And I mean, it's obviously being taken over by some malevolent forces, or a lot of it is. And so this was one of the best possible outcomes for the Rumpus, which has gone through several, series of owners over the last 15 or 20 years. And for those who don't know Roxane and Debbie, just briefly, Roxane Gay is a literary superstar, so you should know about her, and author and cultural critic. And we actually had her on the show last year, so you can go back and check out that interview in our archives. And she writes memoir and cultural criticism and essays and commentary and even a little bit of fiction, I think. And she's just, so admirable, and she's been so influential to me, both as an author and an entrepreneur. I think Roxane, what some people don't think about her as, is that she's always been into the business of writing and publishing in all of her endeavors since her lit mag Pank, which I found out about, 15 or 20 years ago. And then Debbie definitely is not outshined in any way. She was named one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company, and one of the most influential designers working today by Graphic Design USA. And she hosts one of my favorite podcasts, Design Matters. It's just one of the best podcasts about creativity out there. She has such amazing guests. And she's also the co-owner and editorial director of printmag.com. And I know that Roxane had been long involved with the Rumpus, but until we talked with her, Brooke, I didn't realize that she'd been there from the beginning, and she'd been there in so many different roles. And we're going to hear more about that in today's interview. And Roxane and Debbie are married, and there's this touching quote from Debbie in a Publishers Weekly article about last year's acquisition, in which she says, "I first became aware of Roxane Gay's writing through the Rumpus and fell in love with her words. Now that I am married to her, it feels both serendipitous and thrilling to have this extraordinary opportunity, and I look forward to the magical things we will be able to make together." So this is even more special, I think, that they're doing this together, and especially the story they tell about how they decided it. I thought that was really wonderful in our interview with them. So
yeah. Me too. I agree that the whole story is pretty touching, and their plans for the Rumpus are ambitious. They're also very progressive, not surprisingly. They just wrapped up what they call Pride 30, featuring 30 LGBTQ plus writers for Pride in the month of June. And now in July, they're going to be doing an initiative called Freedom Ask, which Roxane is going to talk about in the interview. But it feels like a uniquely Rumpus, again, very progressive and forward way of thinking about America's 250th. I love that they're thinking outside the box. It's par for the course with these two. But Grant, the whole interview made me think about indie media and why it's so profoundly important, because mainstream media, especially right now, is so compromised. It's either corrupted by money and power or kowtowed by this administration, which we're thinking about, of course, as we go into this month and celebrating July 4th. I can say too about corporate publishing, what we might call legacy publishing or big five publishing. Yes, it fancies itself progressive, but there are choices that get made, basically mandated from the powers that be. Of course, are money driven. I mean, we are in a capitalist society trying to make money. I do understand that, but it's still very compromised. It's like I had an experience of that during my time at Seal Press. When you get acquired by bigger and bigger companies, consolidation of media really does kill creativity, and it kills free speech. We're certainly seeing that in the news media. And that's why I just think it's so, so, so important that we seek out and support independent everything, because we really need these voices on the margins more than ever.
Yeah, and I know we both say this frequently on the podcast and beyond, but just want to urge listeners. Sometimes not sometimes, it does take effort to go find books published by indie presses and small presses. You have to go
Yeah.
search them out. You have to make the effort, but it's worth it because those presses are publishing so much of the best stuff out there. And that's because their business model is really to serve stories that bigger publishers and media companies, often or almost always deem to be uncommercial. So I say that also because it's just a scary time because, as you were saying, Brooke, we've lost a lot of independent media, and yet with all this splintering of media, there's also been opportunity. That's the good side of things. And I'm thinking about all the journalists who've struck out on their own, doing Substacks or YouTube channels or podcasts, or even now we're seeing blockbuster movies coming from the grassroots of YouTube, like Obsession, which I know you like a lot or liked a lot. And the downside of this is that, we're all in our own silos and it's contributing to our polarization, I think, in some ways, undoubtedly. Well, Brooke, I'm wondering what you see when you look at the landscape of independent media like the Rumpus. What other outlets are there similar to the Rumpus for literary writers to both read and aspire to publish in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because that's the other thing. Like, we're readers, but because this is also a podcast for writers, people want to get their work published in places like the Rumpus. And so, some that come to mind, The Sun, which has been famous and active since 1974, of course, Catapult, narratively, Electric Lit, Guernica. I mean, there are many that are doing anywhere from fine to good. I'm not sure that
Yeah.
any of them are like, making tons and tons of money. Um, and then there's the difference between print media and online media. And so I am impressed that some of these lit mags can make it work in print because some of them are online only, and Rumpus is online. But to have print requires a really loyal following of readers, and great curation. I guess I should say that's true of both online and print. And some of these places that I just mentioned, they can really launch careers. Like, they have enough of a following that if you have, a few pieces published, or if you happen to get a column, you can, become the next Roxane Gay.
Yeah, absolutely. Good example there. Um, and I felt a little nostalgia as you were listing some of those places, because many have gone under as well. And I'm thinking about Tin House, the magazine, which seemed like one of those untouchable magazines, but it went under. Although fortunately, Tin House Books is still around. It's now owned by Zando. And maybe the biggest loss to the indie writing community was The Believer, which closed in 2022. There was a lot of hoopla and angst when we lost the Gettysburg Review in 2023, and I was actually very happy to be published in that magazine. I do felt it launched me in a way, and it had been one of those magazines where that was just a frequent and regular source for best American essays, best American poetry, and best American short stories, all those annual collections. And I got to say, I also wear a Gettysburg Review T-shirt to the gym, so I'm still
You'll
supporting.
have to wear that
Hope it
next
comes
time.
back. And then I'm thinking of entropy and creative nonfiction, among others. And the pattern here is just either that the print subscriptions weren't keeping up, or that the orgs just couldn't pivot well enough to online to be sustainable, or both. And so the Rumpus really does feel like this really interesting bright light, like it's an established media source at this point, both because what its legacy is and what it's publishing, but also because of having people at the helm like Roxane and Debbie, who are they're known and they're beloved in both literary and design communities. And I think it does make a difference to have figureheads like this to go out and represent what they're doing and contribute to the magazine's following.
I do agree. Yeah. Having a face or faces attached to these endeavors matters to people. It can make the outlet more beloved. It can make people respect it more or want to support it. Speaking of which, the Rumpus and other media needs your support, and I know I'm supporting independent media in ways that I never have before. Like I do pay for a lot of Substacks. I pay for certain podcasts that I listen to frequently. And when I consider it's like $5 to $8 a month or however it might be, it's like sometimes it's $100 a year or something like that. When I really think about it, I'm like, it's so little money. I spend more than that taking my wife and son out to breakfast these days, like quite literally. And so I'm just going to put a plug in here for supporting any kind of indie media that you can this week. It could be the Rumpus, it could be us at Memoir Nation. We have on our website, Grant, all these ways to support us. I mean, becoming a member is certainly one way, but I love the Buy Me a Coffee app that we have because it's like a tip, and so you don't want to subscribe. Maybe it feels like too much of a commitment, but you could just drop like $5 in the tip jar for a job well done this week. And little stuff like that really does matter. So I am going to say, like, I'm going to put the Buy Me a Coffee app URL in the show notes just because, like, we might
Yeah.
get a tip. You never
I
know.
would I would love that. Literally a cup of coffee would be would feel
Yeah,
great.
exactly. It would be really nice.
And maybe an entire breakfast with you and Karen James. Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And these exchanges can be very one way. You don't get to see the faces of the person you're tipping or subscribing to or to know how grateful they are. But I promise you they are. I feel just amazing and amazed at the same time when someone becomes a paid subscriber to my Substack. And I'm always just so, so grateful. And I always write a personal email to each person because I know they don't have to pay for a subscription. And I am one of those anonymous faces. And it kind of redeems humanity to me because I think they're just being generous without any need for accolades or attention. They're just doing it to support. And you have all these, people out there who are obviously doing great work. And of course, we can't subscribe to everything. But I think if you're listening to someone weekly or reading their Substack weekly, then yeah, consider the money and what you would spend for other kinds of education and entertainment or coffee or breakfast for that matter. And then you are part of the reason that person you admire can continue doing the work that they're doing. And that's not only gratifying, it's supporting this wonderful ecosystem, this wonderful discourse that we need as human beings.
Yeah, it's completely true. And celebrating indie media this week and spotlighting the Rumpus for us is essential. We were really excited and, really grateful actually to be able to do this, to be asked and to celebrate all the work that they're doing, but also since 2009. I mean, it's a big deal. And so check out the Rumpus. We can't say enough about this freedom ask. I love the whole idea of it. And although we are recording ahead of it, by the time this episode comes out, Grant, it will be right after the 4th of July. And so you better believe I will be reading those. And we do need some counter programming to the spectacle this administration is making of our beloved nation's 250th. There are so many other and better and more solemn and meaningful and nuanced ways that this could have been done. But of course, we do not have serious or thoughtful people running this country right now. And we need indie media, right? So with that, happy 4th of July week, everyone. 250 is a big deal, by the way. And we at Memoir Nation are celebrating and honoring everything that is wonderful and deeply complex about this great nation and all of our history. And I can't think of more perfect guests to give voice to some of that. And so we will be right back with Roxane Gay and Debbie Millman. Welcome back, everyone. We have two special guests on this week, Debbie Millman and Roxane Gay, and they are here to talk about the new era of the Rumpus under their leadership and vision. So I want to tell you just a little bit about what the Rumpus is. A lot of you know, but it was founded in 2009. It's an influential, independent online literary magazine dedicated to fostering community and championing diverse perspectives. Over 15 years, the publication has served as a premier platform for emerging and established voices, publishing original fiction, poetry, essays, interviews, comics, and cultural criticism. Work published in the Rumpus consistently earns literary awards, the highest, including honors like the Pushcart Prize, PEN Awards, Best American Anthology Series, and more. Today, the Rumpus remains committed to deepening cultural conversations and elevating work that drives a better understanding of the human experience. And so I wanted to say all that because we are interviewing Roxane and Debbie to talk about the Rumpus and its relaunch. So, congratulations to you two. What a treat to get to talk to you about this adventure.
It's
Thank you.
great to be here, Brooke.
Yeah, we're so honored. So, Roxane, I know that you've been part of the Rumpus for a long time, over 10 years. Is that right, or more?
I was with the Rumpus in the very beginning.
Okay. Oh, since the beginning. Okay, great. And
Yes. So I came on board probably 9 months after they started it
wow. Okay.
as a writer, and then I eventually became the essays editor, and then I was on their sort of their advisory board, and then
Okay. Yeah. So since the get-go, pretty much, I mean, Debbie, I'd love to hear what your journey with the Rumpus has been too, but also the question that we're most curious about is the moment that you decided to acquire it. Like, was this a moment, or was it more of a slow roll to realizing, this was what was going to happen?
So do you want me to answer that now?
Yeah, well, I'd love to, and also just what your history is, or if it was more Roxane's history. So yeah, we'd love to know.
Well, it's all Roxane's history with the Rumpus. And I knew about that and was really in awe of what she started when she was there. But I've had a long running reputation and relationship with Print Magazine, which is the oldest print magazine, design magazine in the United States. And I started working with print about at least 25 years ago, and was a columnist, and then the editorial director, and then the company that owned it went bankrupt, and along with four other friends, we bought it out of bankruptcy, and I've been co-running that since 2019. And so I have always had design, writing, and criticism as part of my career over the last 3 decades.
That's so excellent for this partnership, I'm sure. So, Roxane, if you would, was it a moment, or did you just kind of know that this was your inheritance in some way?
Oh, I never thought of it in those terms. So the Rumpus has changed ownership a few times over the past 17, 18 years. And that's in large part because nobody can do this forever. And it's just hard to run a literary magazine and to do so sustainably. And so all of the stewards have always had the Rumpus's best interests at heart. And the most recent owner is a lovely woman named Allison Sinclair. And she ran the Rumpus along with a great team of primarily volunteer staffers. And it was just becoming, I think, too much in addition to her day job and all of the other things she had going on. And so she was looking for someone that she could pass the mantle on to. And the woman who had owned the Rumpus before her, Marissa Siegel, thought of me and reached out and asked if I knew anyone who was interested in buying the Rumpus. And at the time, my mom was dying. And so I was like, oh gosh, no, I have no idea. And I don't have the emotional bandwidth to even begin to help you with this, but I hope it, ends up in good hands. And then later that evening or the next night, Debbie and I were walking our dog while we were visiting my parents. And she was talking about some things she was dealing with her other magazine, with Print Magazine. And I said, it's funny you should mention print because the Rumpus is looking for a buyer and they want me to buy it, but I told them no. And in that immediate instant, Debbie said, oh, we're buying it. And, Scorpio energy, which I love, and I'm a huge fan of. And so after that, we negotiated with Allison to come up to a fair price that would hopefully give her enough of a cushion to move on to her other projects and other initiatives that she's working on. And that would allow us to still have something left over to run the magazine with. And we've been running it since May 2025 now. But first, there was and this Debbie can speak to this, a lengthy redesign process.
Well, that segues perfectly into my question. First, I wanted, though, to say that the just say yes energy that you bring to it or brought to it in that kind of intuitive, impulsive way. Brooke and I definitely share that and often espouse it as a great way to write as well.
Mm.
And I'm super interested because I don't think there's ever been, at least in my knowledge, such a prominent duo in your fields. You know, Debbie, you're a expertise guru, superstar in design matters, and the same goes for Roxane in the literary world. So I'm curious, can you speak to how your particular expertise and sensibility is bringing the Rumpus into this new era? It was so interesting for me to see it actually redesigned because I can't remember any previous design. And I do have my old famous coffee mug. So I'm very curious if they're going to be new coffee mugs.
There will be new mugs at some point. The challenge with mugs is that you have to store them somewhere. They're very they're very heavy and they're very expensive to ship and they're fragile. And so what we're probably going to do is sort of what people do in the food industry, which is hire like a co-packer who will house the merchandise and then ship it out for us. But we do hope to do at least the Write Like a Motherfucker mug.
It's a classic.
Yeah. And we do bring our sensibilities. So I've been in the literary world for a very long time. I have edited or been like an intern, et cetera, as I, moved into the world in literary magazines for about 25, 30 years now. And so I know what I like and I know sort of how to run a magazine, at least in terms of managing what you publish. And Debbie also has exquisite taste and is going to be balancing the literary side with design criticism, cultural criticism, and things like that. And also she has run a successful business before, and she is the more responsible one. But also she's creative, so I don't want to take away from her immense creativity and creative interest in the magazine. But as someone who is not particularly business minded because I've been in academia or working in low-level jobs my whole life, it's great to have her counsel.
And Debbie, maybe you could speak a little bit to the design aesthetic. And we were curious if there was something from the old visual identity that you didn't want to lose. And, like when you think about it, is there stuff that you try to retain when you're coming into a redesign, or is it like clear the deck, start over kind of thing?
It really depends on the client and it depends on what the goals are. There's really no one way to start any redesign initiative because you're really looking at the entity and how are you going to evolve it either from a more revolutionary perspective or an evolutionary perspective. And common vocabulary doesn't always equate with common behavior, and what some people think is evolutionary might be revolutionary or vice versa. But in this particular case, I did want to clear the decks. I think that the previous identity was very much of that particular moment. And given that we were also going to be, as we were planning, moving into design criticism or arts and culture coverage, I wanted to be seen as a leader in the design field. And that would require having a design that was pretty exceptional in order to be taken seriously. And so we commissioned actually a former student of mine. He's long graduated. He's been out of schools for about, I don't know, 12, 15 years at this point, but he's one of my superstar students. And so I'll always see him that way, although he's worked with Radiohead and with Nike and with some of the best and biggest brands and companies and people in the world. But I wanted something that was both elegant and literary, but also really edgy, a little bit risky, a little bit experimental, something that would be highly adaptable in lots and lots of different environments. I wanted a logo that could appear different every time you refreshed the page. And I think he delivered on all fronts. When you go to the site, it has a very literary look. It looks like a table of contents very intentionally, but the logo is moving. If you scroll over the logo, you'll see that it's highly adaptive.
Yeah, I
And
noticed that. It's
Mm-hmm.
very modern. I was like, whoa, this is cool. It's
yeah.
experiential. Yeah, fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more you read the site, the more you look at the different articles and click into different areas of the site, you'll find lots of other little Easter eggs that surprise and delight.
Well, Debbie and Roxane, we're curious to know about how editorial platforms evolve beyond algorithms. And this was something that came up when we were in conversation with your publicity team. And it's interesting because we're being fed so much content based on what we already like. And that's actually, from what I've read, really narrowing our experience. Ironically, the suggestions are all making us more kind of within our own skin constantly, I guess. So are you trying to disrupt that, or is there merit in the algorithms when it comes to catering to your readership?
I mean, we don't have anything to do with algorithms, at least in terms of how we publish and what people are served. They're simply served what we publish chronologically, unless they search for it. That
Mm-hmm.
said, we can't avoid the reality of algorithms when it comes to things like search engines and discoverability. And so no one in the magazine world has figured it out yet. And I don't know that it is something that can be solved for. But what we do try to do is just publish excellent work,
Mm-hmm.
because excellence and just great literature stands the test of time. And that's why we're still talking about the literary greats of ye old times, even now, even though the canon is ever evolving. And we trust that our work will also withstand the test of time and will also withstand the pressures of algorithmic content delivery.
Nice. Someday Rumpus will be ye old times. I like that. So
But we're also expanding into other areas, and beginning in July, we'll have a number of new columnists that are coming on board to do more cultural criticism, different types of essays, different types of coverage. And so I think that will also, I don't think we're thinking in any way algorithmically, but I do think it will increase the interest of readers in other areas. And I'm looking forward to that. If the response to our book club is any indication, I'm really excited about growing the different areas of the site, because it's been extraordinary and well beyond our expectations in terms of the first book club that I'll be hosting on June 30th with Ann Patchett.
Oh, awesome. Well, actually, maybe that is a nice little segue too into my next question, because it was about real world engagement. And you talk in the press release materials about bridging the online literary community with the real world engagement. So maybe that's one example, but is that going to be a primary push to get people actually involved in stuff and interacting in the real world?
I hope so. I mean, we started to promote the book club on our social media, and there's probably just a small number of people on my social media that even know that I'm involved in the Rumpus now, but they will certainly become much more aware of the site once they come and participate in the book club. And that's how we're hoping that the news will spread much more organically than hit people over the head with the constant advertising or any other mode of communication that's more disruptive than enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. And Patcha is such a delight, so that's a great place to start.
Yeah, we have some really big plans for the book club. I'll be hosting that monthly. And I already host two other book clubs, so it's something I really love doing. I co-host the print book club that's also monthly, and I host the Joyful Heart Foundation book club, which is quarterly. So that's not as much of a lift.
Well, I'm going to ask a question. Brooke and I always apologize to our listeners for this topic, but it keeps kind of intruding on our lives and our literature. It's about AI, and we've obviously, it keeps whatever intruding, even with, like, supposedly prize-winning authors. They're accused of using AI, and the consensus of how to deal with it keeps shifting as well as it keeps, like, evolving. And we're basically relying on writers to basically self-disclose at this point. And I know a lot of literary magazines are also just being smothered with submissions as a result. And that's really hazardous to these small little magazines that run on volunteer power. So I'm curious, what kinds of conversations are you having about AI at the Rumpus? And is it present in submissions, or are you feeling it encroaching in any way?
It's definitely present in submissions, and it's frankly very easy to spot because the writing is just bad. Debbie and I have somewhat different opinions about AI, but I am completely opposed to it. I have said so in our guidelines. I have no interest in it. I think it is evil. I think that it makes people dumb. And in terms of writing, I know that there are other things that AI does, but it's not writing if you use AI. And so if you want to use AI to write something, then you should go publish it in an AI publication that's interested in fake stolen writing. And I just refuse to open the door to it. It's just never going to happen in terms of anything I'm doing, because it only encroaches if you allow it to. And so for me, at least, we have a very firm boundary against AI, because why would we invest this much time, energy, and money in a magazine only to not celebrate the beauty of writing, the imperfections of great writing, and as Debbie said, with regard to the design, the surprise and delight of great writing.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarity so much, because I think as literary programs, I have a press, you have magazines, like if we don't have a line, it just, to your point, it will encroach, and it's already there. We see it in our submissions too. And I think it's why I'm a little bit obsessed by it, because it's so ever present right now. It's very frustrating.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think people will always try to outsmart the AI giveaways, but where Roxane and I 100% do agree is that we will not tolerate publishing anything that isn't original. And AI writing is not original. So we 100% agree on that. If anything does slip through the cracks and ends up on our site, they would never ever get published again. So, and it would be taken down immediately. We have zero tolerance for any type of plagiarism or use of AI.
Yeah. Again, thanks for that. I want to ask a question about Rumpus Pride 30. It rolled out in the month of June. Unfortunately, we are going to be airing this in July, so book club with Anne will be in the rearview mirror, but people can for sure take advantage of future ones.
Oh, and also it'll be taped and living on the site.
Oh,
So
perfect.
that'll
Okay,
be, yeah.
excellent. So we'll make note of that for sure. And but Pride 30 celebrates 30 essential LGBTQ plus writers and works from the Rumpus archives. So this is really exciting to spotlight queer literary voices. You guys had Lissa Febos, Saeed Jones, Alejandro Varela, and others. And so I was just curious if you could speak a little bit more about the inspiration of this. And it talked about being delivered in an anthology, and I was curious about that as well. Like, is that an online anthology, or is that something people will be able to get in print now or eventually?
It won't be in print. We do not yet do print publications, and I don't know if we will go down that road in a quarterly fashion, maybe an annual fashion or a biannual fashion. But we are hoping to make a sort of digital version of as a PDF that people can access of all of this writing. And we also hope that people will dig through our archives, starting with these pieces. We wanted to celebrate the amazing writing from the LGBTQ community that the Rumpus has published over the past 17 years. And our archives are deep. They're deep, and they are very rich.
Yeah.
And there are far more queer writers that have written for us than these 30, but we thought that these 30 really exemplified what we look for at the Rumpus, what we value, and what we love.
And will it be something that you'll do every June?
Hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. Awesome. I love it.
Especially as we publish new material as well. We also have a very big initiative coming up beginning in July. Roxane, do you want to talk about our Freedom Ask?
Yes. So as we've thought about July 4th, and the fact that it is the 250th anniversary of sort of the birth of a stolen nation. Um, we have been interested in thinking about counter programming to a lot of the intensely patriotic, history ignoring rhetoric, particularly from the administration all the way on down, and how we can start some kind of conversation that isn't about all of this blind patriotism, which I have no problem with people feeling patriotic about the country they're from, etc. But this country's history is so fraught, starting with the fact that it was colonized by the British and the French and others. And then, of course, the stain of enslavement and all of the other historical wrongs that have happened over the past 250 years. Like, yes, we can celebrate the good, but we should also think about, contextualize, and remember the not so good and the downright bad and evil. And so to that end, we have decided to reach out to luminaries across a range of fields just to ask them, what is freedom? Because we talk about freedom and just use the word in a fairly empty way. And so we were just curious what other people thought about freedom and how they would define it. And we left it very open and very simple in that they could respond with a sentence, a word, an image, a song if they so felt inclined. And we've gotten responses from Gloria Steinem and Debbie
Eileen Miles.
Eileen Miles.
That right
Yes.
there. Yeah, a lot of
Awesome.
really
That's
incredible
Wow.
people.
It's going to be great.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I just run a piece every day, an answer alongside the rest of our content every day for quite a while, because we can tell that we're gonna get more than 31 responses.
Yeah.
yeah, that's
We're hoping
tremendous.
that might be able to run it through the rest of the year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would think.
For 250, I love it. Yes. Keep that conversation going.
Yeah.
I love the openness of it too. We had Jose Antonio Vargas on the show a while back, and his nonprofit Define American. I love that, just that premise of Define American, because it really opens up the conversation. And I think that's what, that's why we value and need independent media and lit mags for. So, so happy that you guys are especially like with the history of the Rumpus in mind, that lit mags oftentimes need somebody to save them and keep them and make them sustainable. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a bit about the future of independent literary media, and where do you see it going, and what are your concerns, and what makes you hopeful?
I think the future is complicated for any media, and it's particularly fraught for literary publications, because as technology advances, it makes it harder and harder for people to even discover that these magazines exist, especially now with Google using those AI summaries. When you put in search terms, that has cut down web traffic to everyone across the board exponentially. And so we have to stay true to ourselves, but we do also have to evolve. I was recently speaking with the editor of LA Taco, which is an independent publication in Los Angeles, and his name is Javier Cabral. And one of the key things that they're trying to do is maintain their journalistic integrity, but not fight the future so much. And so they're trying to put their journalism on not only the website, but in different platforms, and particularly social media platforms like TikTok. And so, to that end, while we are traditionalists in some ways, both Debbie and I are also interested in innovation, and we do recognize that things are going to change whether we like it or not. So we've brought on a lovely young woman who's going to be doing some social media things for us, introducing our editors to people, introducing and sharing excerpts from our work so that people can start to discover the Rumpus in places where we haven't necessarily gone to before for audiences. But the biggest challenge is always money. And
It always is.
that's what it is. And most magazines live and die by the benevolence of patrons. And we do have two amazing patrons, Ruth Ann Arnett and Suki Novogratz. We are very, very grateful for their generosity. They're our co-publishers, but they allow us to they would not allow us, but they didn't ask for anything in return other than just credit where credit is due. And so we maintain editorial independence and ownership, and that's a gift. And we do not take it for granted.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask one very off-track kooky question to close our conversation? I have this dog named Buster, and Buster is on my lap almost every moment of the day. I'm surprised he's not here right now, so that he's become my strange writing companion, even though the laptop fits perfectly on him, but sometimes tilts around a little bit. And Roxane, I read the greatest author dog story about you in the New York Times. And so I'm curious, what role does your dog have in this new Rumpus?
Where is he?
There he is. Be nice or leave.
Oh, wait. I want to say you guys something. Especially if you're
That's the role. He's a
Aww.
Oh, yes.
Oh, the Knicks. Yeah, I just saw the Knicks. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's
So our dog
fabulous.
Max is a lovely, lovely dog, and we enjoy him very much. And we actually named our holding company after our dog.
So big role. The answer is
So,
a big role.
Frankly, Max owns 100% of the business, and he runs a very tight ship, and he keeps Debbie and I in line.
He does indeed.
There's
He's a
the
real
future
taskmaster,
of,
that
yeah.
canine.
I was going to say the future of independent media is canines.
Mm-hmm.
Takes a whole new meaning of Dog Day afternoon.
Yeah. Maybe dogs can start sniffing out AI.
Oh, gosh, from your lips to God's ears.
Oh, well, thank you two so much for this. And what a fantastic, thing that you're doing for the literary community. And we're encouraging all of our listeners to go and, become members if they're not already, and check out all the cool offerings.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We really
so
appreciate
much.
you giving us this attention. We love what you guys do.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a treat.
Well, Grant, in honor of celebrating indie mags and indie media, and in honor of celebrating our nation's 250th birthday this week for today's trend, I want to talk about celebrations.
Imagine that. What a great idea. And yeah, what a nice way to buoy our readers too, who I imagine get to the end of our episodes sometimes and they're like, what horrible, somber, terrible trend are we going to bring them today? Such as AI has taken over the world. So run now.
Exactly. Yeah. And there is good stuff, obviously. And occasionally we can bring ourselves to bring you a good trend. And we mentioned this in passing in one previous show, but we are officially now, starting in September, going to be honoring writers in our community on this show, meaning that we're going to be celebrating their publications. So we want to invite people over to memoirnation.com, the community. If you're already a member, then you access the community from our site just by clicking the community menu tab. So it's there in the shared back end part of the community where you can find this space that's called share your publication deets. That's important. You do actually have to log in. Then what happens, Grant?
Well, then you fill out a Google form, which is super fun and interesting to do. And then you'll be given a shout out on this show, starting in September. It's going to be so fun. We have no idea how many people are going to sign up. So if there's a backlog, you may need to be patient. I hope that's the case. And
Me too.
Yeah, we're just really excited about this initiative and having this place here on Memoir Nation to showcase some of you, to honor your hard work. We know as much or more than anybody that writing a memoir is just such a big deal, and it should be not only celebrated but shouted from the rooftops. And so that's what we're aiming to do, is shout from the rooftops of Memoir Nation and hopefully prompt some sales in the process. Brooke, I'm just imagining us up on those mythical Memoir Nation rooftops in our little community.
I love
of
that
memoir writers.
image. Yeah, absolutely. We can paint
With a
ourselves
megaphone.
on, yes, to those houses. I would just love to be there with the smoke that says memories.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful image. I hope it will move the needle on some sales, and also if we can pull it off, we'll partner these shout outs with social media posts as well. There's literally no reason why we can't do that. So I'm just saying it tentatively because we're not there yet, but that will be amplifying it to our community. And honestly, nothing makes us happier.
Yeah. And, on that note, let's celebrate the community and our listeners right now, because we're heading into the end of our 8th season, our 8th full year to close this month, which is just amazing. And so, but it's all because of the listeners. If no one showed up, I don't think we'd be doing this.
It's so
it
true.
is fun, and I've learned a lot, but we need the listeners. So thank you so much for showing up and listening. It's a great deal of encouragement. And please sign up for memoirnation.com if you haven't yet, and get a membership, and stand up on those rooftops with Brooke and me, and yell out your celebrations to others. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.